Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to my hobby blog. I'm so excited today because I just finished one of my favorite books in recent memory, and I'm talking about Stephen King's Insomnia. And this is a thickums chonker book. It is almost 800 pages in hardcover, and this was just an absolute joy to read. I will do a mostly non-spoiler, but I will do some spoiler stuff in here as well. And this book came out in 1994, which means that this came out quite a bit after the book It, because one of the things that I love about this book is that it takes place in the town or city of Derry, which is where Pennywise haunted for I don't know how many thousands of years. And it was just absolutely fantastic to revisit that and revisit the characters that I grew to love throughout the book of It. And on top of that, we also have a really great new cast of characters of Ralph, who is the main character. He's about 71, 72 years old, and he's the one who has insomnia, as the book is titled. And he just deals with some of the most terrifying things that I've read in a while. And it also was really fun to read because there was a lot of sort of Twin Peaks type of atmosphere in this book, which I love. Twin Peaks. It's one of my favorite TV shows of all time. I love the movie that took place between season 2 and season 3. And, well, chronologically, it was a prequel. But anyways, I would describe this book as Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock meets Twin Peaks. And I think that description is very apt because the thing I love about Rear Window is that we have a guy who is sort of stuck in his circumstances. In Rear Window's case, he has a broken leg and he can't move anyway. So he uses his binoculars and witnesses crime and tries to figure out who the killer is and all this different stuff. And it's fantastic. I love that movie. It's one of my favorites. But also, in regards to insomnia, it's this guy who develops insomnia after the death of his wife of 40-something years. So you have a really deeply personal story going on in this book. And this is something I think Stephen King does very well, is getting you to sort of get to know a character forwards and backwards, just really intimately. And I just love this book. This was one of my favorite books I've read this month yet, of October, let alone in the second half of the year. This was just straight awesome. And the page count was a bit long, and it did take a little bit of time to get into. The first is split up into 3 parts, or 4 parts maybe. And part 1 is 300 pages. And it took me about 3 days to finish the entire book. So this was definitely a page turner. I loved it. The atmosphere is very just mysterious and great. I mean, again, it reminded me of Twin Peaks. And I just loved the cast of characters as well. I loved Lois. I loved Helen. The character of Ed Deepno was really fascinating. I loved reading about him. But some of the events that happen in this book is very harrowing for me because it's very sort of twisted in terms of what the characters are doing. And I was really sort of struck by how the characters sort of reacted, because this book was written in 1994, so it was about 10 years after It. But it also came out after book 2, I believe, of The Dark Tower, which is Stephen King's fantasy work, or epic fantasy series that he's written. And this book has a lot of crossovers with it, but the thing that was harrowing to me was that abortion is a big theme in this book, and so, or not really theme, but is a big topic for this book, because we have a woman by the name of Susan Day who is coming to town. She's a feminist author and debate person who sort of comes to many different towns around America and gives talks and speeches and tries to get people to accept more sort of women's rights and autonomy, and letting women know that, you know, they can be themselves. They don't have to be in marriage, and they don't have to stick with a man who forces them to have a baby and all this stuff, because we have a few characters who sort of are stuck in a relationship with a really shitty guy, but the sticking with the kids or whatever. And then a big event happens about midway through the book where the woman is forced to leave the community. And Ralph, the main character, has to find a way to support her in terms of emotionally and getting back at the husband who is actually caught up in this greater conspiracy to bring down Susan Day, who is sort of coming to town. And there's a petition that goes on of different people in the town saying, like, we want her to come. And there's a lot of signatures, so she is able to eventually come. But it's a really sort of twisted turn of events that goes on. I'm not going to go into detail with that, but this is a really fascinating book to read, especially today, because 30 years later, this was written in 1994, it's 2025 when I'm reviewing this. And a lot of the same things, same attitudes, same sort of catchphrases that we hear are in this book, which was really surprising to me. Because, I don't know, I feel like it's a newer issue, but that's probably just because of how young I am. I'm only 29. So maybe this has been something that's been going on a lot longer. I don't know. It's just really tired to me that this is sort of still going on, because personally, I feel like abortion is healthcare. It's something that is needed within the healthcare system, and it's something that I think should absolutely be used. So, reading about the characters in this book who are 30 years written ago, or written 30 years ago, and they're sort of going on and on about their views and stuff, I'm kind of like, yeah, I get it, but no. Like, this is not something that we should still be dealing with in the 2020s. Like, I feel like humanity needs to progress and become better in this regard. And this book really kind of goes in to all of the sort of intricacies of all of the different attitudes around abortion. And that's something that I find really fascinating to read, especially in this day and age, as I said. But in terms to go, but I think, I'm trying to think of any other non-spoiler thoughts I have. I think all of the crossovers with the Dark Tower was really cool. There's these sort of mystical entities that show up. I won't go into any detail with them, but they're from the Dark Tower series. From what I understand, I haven't read the Dark Tower. I have books 1 to 4 on my shelf. They're ready to read. I just wanted to read this book first because I heard that this should be read before the Dark Tower. And then I looked it up and I found out that it's actually after book 2 that a lot of people recommend to read Insomnia. So maybe I made a mistake, I don't know, but I thought those sections were very cool with all the different aliens and entities and sort of the description about the Dark Tower and all the different levels of reality. And it's just really cool. The magic system in this book is also really cool because our main character, when he starts having insomnia, he is able to see these auras, which is basically like people's mood and sort of what they're thinking. And the more you use it, the more easily you're able to tap into people's subconsciousness and able to read the thoughts. And that really contributes to the storyline in a very satisfying way, where our characters are able to get answers that they want, but then it goes a totally different direction than what they expect, and they have to adapt. And this is sort of my favorite thing in horror and fantasy and tension and thrillers and all that, is the unexpected and having to have the characters adapt to the situation. And this book is full of that. I loved it. There's some really creepy killers in this book too. Really creepy societies as well. Like, it's just amazing. I love this book. But in terms of the spoilers, if you haven't read this book, creep out now. But I thought the events in this book that especially harrowed me and shocked me was the lighting of the fire of the woman's shelter outside of town, because this was where the woman who got battered early in the book went to in order to get support from other women who were in a similar case as hers. And she gets there and everything seems very good, very golden. Everyone's doing well. She's sending letters to our main character. And he's feeling really good because he's finally able to wrap his head around the magic system. and sort of uses it for good, and things are looking up. Everything's going well. But we have these crazy characters, anti-abortion characters, who are really going into some really violent behaviors, and everyone doesn't really know what to do because they don't want to stoop as low as them and do violence back to them. But it ends up that whatever they do is not going to stop them. So they sort of inadvertently cause these men to show up to this farm in total anger, and they torch the entire building down and kill a lot of people. They shoot people in the face and the head, killing them instantly. They kill, they don't kill Susan Doyle or Susan Day there, but they light the house on fire, and the police show up, and it's a really tense scene because a bunch of the women and children that are there sheltering are in the basement, and there's a big sort of lock that's keeping them inside so that the men couldn't get to them, but it traps them in the basement, and it's really scary to read about because they have to use the magic system. Lois, who is the love interest, whose husband dies early in the book, I believe. I can't remember exactly. I read this in 3 days, so a lot of the events have sort of shuffled around in my head. But she and Ralph, the main character, they're in a love relationship. And so they show up to this farm because they get tipped off about it from one of the entities. And they get there, and there's a shoot-off going on between the men and the police. And then a lot of the women have been shot and executed. And so Lois and Ralph, they go out to the behind the building, and they use the magic system to teleport down into the cellar, and some of the kids are like, oh my gosh, angels are here, which is really cool. I mean, I love stuff like that. Was like, that's how they explain the situation, but the reader knows as just, it's Ralph and Lois. And so they get there, and they help the kids. They help them to escape from the basement, and they free all the women, and then he kills, or not really kills, but he uses his magic to sap the life force out of the last man who is sort of going on a shoot-off with the police. And this was a really interesting section because it feels like the climax of the book, but then we get the final climax, which feels a lot like the It climax, where we have the characters going through the sewer, getting to the big bad, and Lois and Ralph, they get to the entity who is called like the Crimson King or something like that, or it's the pawn of the Crimson King. It's like Atropo, I think his name is. He's one of the 3 sort of doctors that they reference throughout the entire book, because the first 2 doctors that we meet, they are sort of like angels that let humans go on to the next life. So allow them to die. And they have these big scissors where they cut the life force from these people, and then they die. But this 3rd doctor, he is an agent of chaos and of the random, they call it. And Ralph and Lois are like, oh my gosh, we need to take down Atropo because he's going to try and kill Lois, along with all these men who he is influencing and sort of brewing a lot of hate and anger within them using his magic. In terms of how Ralph uses the magic to read the thoughts, he's able to implant sort of emotions and lets them really fester and focus in on the hate. And they get to Atropo, and they completely take over him and convince him to try and lessen the damage, but he's kind of like, hey, like, this guy's in the plane, he's going to crash himself into the tower, or the skyscraper that Susan Day, what's her name? Yeah, Susan Day, she is speaking at, and there's thousands of people, so thousands of people are going to die if they don't succeed in the mission. And it's just all this tension is going on, and I really love this book. Susan Day ends up getting killed. She's decapitated, and a few dozen people die, but compared to what it could have been, Ralph sort of sees it as a success. It's still a tragedy, and it's really sad, but I just really love this book. This is probably one of my favorite Stephen King books I've read, but it was just really interesting, and I'm very happy to have read it. I now feel like I need to read The Dark Tower because I've sort of caught up with all the books that people recommend reading before it. I haven't really read sort of the smaller works that people recommend, but I've read Salem's Lot and Insomnia now, so I feel like I'm ready for The Dark Tower, and I'm really excited to get into it. So let me know what you think about this book, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you guys at the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and please have a great rest of the day.